Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of Kaizen Kanban.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of a book called Kaizen Kanban, a visual facilitation approach to create prioritized project pipelines by Fabrice Bouchereau.
Right.
Now, what's interesting about this book is that it's not just a theoretical framework.
Yeah.
It actually follows this change agent named Bill D. Smith as he implements Kaizen Kanban at this struggling bicycle company called VeloCycle, which has been recently acquired by a much larger company called SportsMax.
That's right.
And we're going to follow Bill's journey as he kind of unravels all these challenges and implements this system.
Yeah, and you know, it's really interesting because you so often see this this firefighter problem,
Right.
where companies are so busy putting out these daily fires that they have no time for proactive improvement. And you probably know the feeling yourself, that constant pressure of urgent tasks, leaving no space for actually like making things better.
Yeah, it's like drowning in emails and meetings, and you can never come up for air to actually like think strategically.
Exactly.
So so tell me more about VeloCycle. Like, what kind of fires were they battling when Bill walked in the door?
Okay, so imagine this. You walk into a factory.
Okay.
And there are safety hazards everywhere.
Oh.
Materials are piled up all over the place.
Wow.
Inventories blocking workstations.
Oh my goodness.
There are even stacks of unpaid bills.
That sounds like a pretty chaotic picture.
It was a mess.
So Bill comes in as this sort of like process whisperer.
Yeah.
Who can blend methodologies and get teams working together. So how does he even begin to like untangle that mess?
Well, you know, the first thing he does is he starts by mapping out their actual processes.
Okay.
He doesn't just rely on old documentation. It's very hands-on. So think like pen and paper.
Okay.
Observing the real workflow to understand what's truly happening on the ground.
That makes sense. But wouldn't people resist changing their ways, especially in a company that's been doing things a certain way for so long?
You're absolutely right. That's a huge challenge. And that's where this 7 ways exercise comes in.
Okay.
Teams repeatedly map the process.
Okay.
Each time adding more detail or a new perspective.
Right.
And this reveals hidden variations in how things are actually done.
Huh?
But it also ensures that everyone feels heard and their input is valued.
So it's like this collaborative process of uncovering the truth about the workflow, which makes people more open to change.
Exactly. And once the team has this clear picture, they can start to see the waste in the system.
Waste. Oh, yeah. This is where that classic mnemonic comes in handy. Decreasing overall waste is up to me.
That's the one.
I remember learning about the 7 types of waste in lean methodology, but how do those actually show up at VeloCycle?
Okay, well, think about those piles of inventory we talked about.
Okay.
That's a clear sign of overproduction, you know, making more than what's needed right now. And those unpaid bills, that points to waiting.
Okay.
You know, maybe waiting for approvals or information, which stalls the whole process.
Right.
So,
okay, I see how those like real-life examples really bring the concept of waste to life. But wasn't there also the problem of non-value-added activities?
yeah.
How did Bill's team tackle that?
They use a tool called a SIPOC diagram,
Okay.
which maps out the suppliers, inputs, process outputs, and customers of a process.
Right.
But they didn't stop at the basic version. They added extra layers of information like triggers to pinpoint bottlenecks and areas for improvement.
I'm not sure I understand what those are.
So a trigger is something that indicates the conditions are right to move on to the next step.
Okay.
For example, at VeloCycle, the trigger for ordering more materials might be when the inventory level reaches a certain point.
Right.
But they found many steps had no clear trigger, which created confusion and delays.
So by mapping out the triggers, they could see where the process was breaking down. That's smart. Did they find any specific bottlenecks through this process?
They did. It turned out the buyer was involved in a staggering 92% of the process steps.
Wow. That definitely sounds like a bottleneck waiting to happen.
Yeah, it was.
So what did Bill do with that information?
Well, they took a deep dive into those steps and discovered that 64% of the buyer's actions were actually non-value added.
That's a huge amount of wasted effort.
It is.
So I'm guessing that's where the concept of value added versus non-value added, or VAN/VA, comes into play.
Exactly. And here's a key insight. Most companies waste a shocking 70 to 90% of their resources on non-value added activities.
Really?
Focusing on eliminating those wasteful activities often yields bigger gains than simply trying to optimize the value-added tasks.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's like realizing you're spending most of your time on things that don't really matter.
Exactly.
But how did Bill get the team to understand this and start focusing on the right areas?
Okay, so they used a technique called failure modes and effects analysis, or FMEA. This helps identify and mitigate risks before they become major problems.
Right.
Imagine it as a pre-mortem for your processes.
Okay.
But you're right, that can be pretty technical and maybe intimidating for some team members.
Right.
Which is why Bill used a technique called the F-box.
The F-box.
He broke the team into subgroups
Okay.
and had them visually map out potential failure modes and their effects right on the process map itself.
Oh, wow.
Making it more interactive and engaging.
So they were like proactively looking for potential problems and their impact.
Exactly. And through this exercise, the team at VelociCycle identified 200 potential failure modes.
200.
They then used a scoring system to prioritize the top 40 based on the likelihood of those failures happening and how severe the consequences would be.
Wow. So they have like a whole list of things that could potentially go wrong.
They did.
But with so many potential problems, how did they decide which ones to tackle first?
That's where the PICK chart comes in.
Okay.
It stands for Possible Implement Challenge and Kill. It's a visual tool for prioritizing projects based on their difficulty and potential payoff.
Right.
They use a scoring system to rate each problem, moving beyond gut feelings to make more objective decisions.
So it's like a structured way of saying, okay, we have limited resources, so which problems will give us the biggest bang for our buck?
Exactly. And to categorize their improvement projects, they use the 5 levels of Kaizen.
5 levels of Kaizen.
Point Kaizen, Mini Kaizen, Blitzflow Kaizen, and Supply Chain Kaizen.
That sounds like a lot to digest.
Well, each level is suited for a different scale of improvement.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Point Kaizen is for small individual improvements.
Right.
While Supply Chain Kaizen could involve multiple companies optimizing an entire value stream.
Okay, so they now had a framework for categorizing their projects based on their complexity, but how did they actually keep track of everything and make sure everyone was working on the right things?
That's where the Kaizen Kanban board comes in.
Okay.
It's a physical board with cards representing each prioritized project, acting as a visual hub for managing all those Kaizen projects.
So the board becomes this central command center for continuous improvement, allowing everyone to see what's happening and where their efforts fit in.
Exactly. And to link each project to their business objectives, the team color-coded the board.
Oh.
For example, projects aimed at reducing safety incidents might have red cards,
Okay.
while projects focused on increasing profitability might have green cards.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to make the board even more powerful and informative. It's like a visual dashboard for continuous improvement.
It is.
But what happened to Bill? Did he stick around to see all these improvements implemented?
His mission was accomplished. Remember, he was brought in to assess the situation and create an action plan.
Right.
The implementation was handed over to his mentee, Kira Lamb, who used her project management-inspired approach called Lean Agility.
So Bill laid the groundwork, and Kira took the baton to lead VelociCycle into a brighter future, using her own unique approach. This is getting really exciting, but hold on. Looks like we're out of time for this segment.
Don't worry, we'll pick up right where we left off next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Kaizen Kanban. Last time we left off with Bill handing the reins over to Kira.
Right.
And I'm really curious to learn more about her lean agility methodology. It sounds like it builds upon those Kaizen Kanban principles, but adds another layer of agility.
It does. Kira understood that for continuous improvement to really stick, it couldn't just be a top-down initiative.
Right.
It needed to be driven by the people doing the work.
That makes sense, but wouldn't that lead to chaos? How do you empower teams without things spiraling out of control?
Well, that's where lean agility comes in. It's about giving teams autonomy while also providing them with the right tools and structures.
Okay.
Lean agility draws heavily on agile project management principles, like working in short iterations, getting frequent feedback, and focusing on delivering value quickly.
So it's like taking those Kaizen principles and turbocharging them with agile methodologies.
Exactly. And remember those visual tools we talked about, like the SIPOC diagram and FMEA? They might seem a bit intimidating at first, but Kira found creative ways to make them accessible and engaging for everyone.
Well, they did come from the world of manufacturing, so I could see how some people might find them a bit, well, industrial strength.
Yeah.
But how do you make those tools relevant to people who aren't engineers or factory managers?
It's all about connecting them back to everyday experiences.
Okay.
For instance, with the SIPOC, you could ask someone, think about how you make coffee each morning. What are your suppliers? Maybe it's the coffee shop or your grocery store. What are your inputs? Coffee beans, water filters, what's the process? Grinding the beans, heating the water, brewing the output is your delicious cup of coffee, and the customer, that's you.
So you break it down into something relatable and then apply those same principles to a work process.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the FMEA? I imagine people wouldn't be thrilled about analyzing potential failures all the time.
Well, instead of framing it as failure analysis, you could call it risk brainstorming or pre-problem solving. And instead of focusing on big catastrophic failures, you could start with smaller everyday problems.
Right.
For example, you could ask, what are some things that could go wrong during our next team meeting, and how can we prevent them?
Okay, that's a much more approachable way of thinking about it.
Right.
It takes the fear out of failure and turns it into a proactive problem-solving exercise.
Exactly.
So with lean agility, these teams are constantly making small improvements. But how do you ensure those improvements actually align with the company's overall goals?
That's where the Kaizen Kanban board becomes crucial. Remember how Bill's team color-coded their board to link projects to key business objectives?
Right.
Well, Kira took that a step further.
Okay. What did she do? Did she add glitter and flashing lights?
Not quite, but she did introduce a system where each team had their own mini Kanban board that visually connected their work to the larger company goals.
Okay.
So while teams had the freedom to identify and tackle their own problems, they always had that visual reminder of how their efforts contributed to the bigger picture. So it's like having those nested dolls where each smaller doll fits perfectly inside the larger one.
Yeah.
You have individual teams working on their own improvements, but those improvements are always aligned with the overall strategy.
Exactly.
That's pretty elegant.
It is. And by regularly reviewing those boards and having open discussions, teams could share their progress, learn from each other, and stay aligned.
So it's not just about having the board, it's about using it as a communication tool, a catalyst for continuous improvement.
Right now, remember those 200 potential failure modes that Bill's team identified?
Oh yeah, 200 problems.
Well, Kira's lean agility system provided a structured way to tackle those problems.
It's a lot of problems. I can imagine it would be easy to get overwhelmed and not know where to start.
Exactly. But Kira helped the teams break those problems down into manageable chunks.
Okay.
She encouraged them to use techniques like the 5 whys to get to the root cause of each problem, then brainstorm solutions and experiment to see what worked best.
So it's like that saying, how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Right. They weren't trying to solve everything at once, but instead focused on making small, continuous improvements.
Exactly. And by empowering those self-managing teams, Kira unlocked a tremendous amount of creativity and problem-solving potential within VelociCycle.
This is all incredibly inspiring, but I keep wondering how these principles could be applied outside a business setting. What about in our personal lives? Could we create a personal Kaizen Kanban board to manage our own goals and projects?
Absolutely. Imagine a board with columns for different areas of your life: health, finances, relationships, personal growth.
Okay.
You could use cards to represent your goals and projects, prioritizing them based on their importance and urgency.
So I could have a card for write that novel, another for learn to play the guitar, and maybe even one for finally clean out my closet, and I could move them around as my priorities shift.
Exactly. And you could use different colors to represent different time frames, short-term goals, long-term aspirations, or even those lingering tasks you've been putting off.
That's brilliant. I'm already picturing my own personal Kaizen Kanban board. It could be a game changer for getting organized and staying focused on what matters most. But beyond personal productivity, what about using these principles to tackle bigger societal challenges?
That's a great point. Imagine applying Kaizen Kanban to issues like climate change, poverty, or education.
Right.
You could use these tools to break down complex problems, identify root causes, and empower communities to create positive change.
It's a powerful vision. It's like taking those principles of continuous improvement and scaling them up to address the biggest challenges we face as a society. Yeah. It gives me hope that even in the face of daunting problems, we can make a difference one small step at a time.
And it's not just about the practical solutions. It's about changing the way we think and approach those problems.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture of continuous improvement, collaboration, and empowerment.
It's about shifting from a mindset of this is how it's always been done to a mindset of how can we make things better. And that shift in thinking can be incredibly transformative both for individuals and for society as a whole.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of transformation, let's move on to another exciting aspect of this story. Remember how Kira's lean agility methodology was all about empowering self-managing teams?
Yeah.
Well, this had a profound impact on the company culture at VelociCycle.
Okay, tell me more about that. What happened when those teams were given more autonomy and responsibility? Okay, tell me more about that. What happened when those teams were given more autonomy and responsibility?
Well, one of the first things Kira did was introduce the concept of team charters.
Team charters, what are those?
A team charter is a document that outlines the team's purpose, goals, roles, and responsibilities.
Okay.
It's like a mini constitution for the team created by the team members themselves.
So it's not something imposed from the top down,
Yeah.
but something that comes from the collective wisdom and experience of the team.
Right.
That's really interesting.
It is. And by going through this process, teams were able to define their own identity, their own way of working, and their own measures of success.
Okay.
It fostered a sense of ownership and accountability.
That makes a lot of sense. When people have a say in how they work and what they're working towards, they're much more likely to be engaged and committed. But how did those team charters actually translate into real-world improvements at VelociCycle?
Well, one team focused on improving communication between the sales and production departments.
Okay.
They created a shared Kanban board where they could track orders, identify potential bottlenecks, and collaborate on solutions.
Okay.
This reduced lead times, minimized errors, and improved customer satisfaction.
So by improving communication and collaboration, they were able to streamline the entire process.
Exactly.
That's a great example of how empowering teams can lead to tangible results.
It is. And another team focused on improving workplace safety. They conducted regular Gemba walks, which is a lean practice of going to the actual place where work is done to observe and understand the process.
So it's not about sitting in a conference room and theorizing, but about getting out there and seeing how things actually work in the real world.
Right. And through these Gemba walks, the team identified several potential hazards like poorly lit areas and cluttered walkways.
Right.
They then worked together to implement solutions such as installing brighter lighting and creating designated walkways.
So they weren't just identifying problems, but were also empowered to take action and implement solutions.
Exactly.
That's a powerful example of how lean agility can create a safer and more efficient work environment.
And it's not just about the physical environment. Lean agility also had a profound impact on the mental and emotional well-being of the employees.
Okay, tell me more about that. How did it affect the company culture and the way people felt about their work?
Well, by giving teams more autonomy and responsibility, Kira fostered a culture of trust and respect.
Okay.
People felt valued for their contributions and empowered to make a difference. This led to increased motivation, job satisfaction, and a sense of shared purpose.
So it wasn't just about improving processes or products, it was about creating a more human-centered workplace.
Exactly, and that shift in mindset had a ripple effect throughout the organization.
Okay.
Employees were more engaged, more innovative, and more committed to the company's success.
This is all so inspiring, but I can't help but wonder, wasn't there some pushback change? It can be hard, even when it's positive change. How did Kira deal with people who were resistant to lean agility?
You're right, change is rarely easy. Some people were skeptical at first. They were used to the old ways of doing things and worried that lean agility would just add more work to their plates.
That's understandable. So how did she win them over?
Kira was really smart about how she approached it instead of forcing it on people. She started with small pilot projects, inviting teams to volunteer and experiment with lean agility principles.
Okay.
She focused on creating a safe space for learning and experimentation where people could try new things without fear of failure.
So she created a sort of prove-it-to-me environment where people could see the benefits of lean agility firsthand before fully committing.
Exactly. And once those pilot projects started showing results, improved efficiency, reduced errors, increased team morale, other teams began to take notice. It became contagious.
That's a great strategy. It reminds me of that saying, seeing is believing. It's one thing to talk about the benefits of a new approach, but quite another to actually see those benefits in action.
Absolutely. And Kira was also very intentional about celebrating those early wins, both big and small.
Okay.
She created a culture of recognition where people felt appreciated for their efforts and contributions.
That's so important. Recognition and appreciation can go a long way in motivating people and fostering a positive work environment.
And it wasn't just about celebrating successes, it was also about learning from mistakes. Kira encouraged a culture of continuous learning where mistakes were seen as opportunities for growth rather than something to be punished.
So it was about creating a safe space for experimentation where people felt comfortable taking risks and trying new things, even if it meant making a mistake along the way.
Exactly. And that's a key principle of both Kaizen and Agile, to embrace a culture of continuous learning and improvement.
It's so interesting to see how these principles can be applied not just to specific tasks or projects, but to the overall work culture. It's like weaving those principles into the very fabric of the organization.
You're right, and that cultural shift was really the key to Velocico's transformation. They went from a company that was reactive, siloed, and struggling to keep up, to a company that was proactive, collaborative, and thriving.
That's a remarkable turnaround. It really shows the power of Kaizen Kanban and lean agility to not just improve efficiency, but to create a more fulfilling and engaging work experience.
And it's not just about businesses. These principles can be applied to any area of life where you want to see positive change.
You know, you've really got me thinking about how I can apply Kaizen Kanban in my own life. We talked about that personal Kanban board, but it goes beyond that, doesn't it? It's a mindset, a way of approaching challenges and striving for continuous improvement.
It is, imagine approaching your relationships, your health, your creative pursuits with that same Kaizen spirit.
Instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture, you break things down into smaller steps. Focus on making incremental improvements and celebrate those wins along the way.
Exactly. And you invite collaboration, seeking feedback and support from others.
It's about embracing that journey of continuous improvement, knowing that there's always room to grow and learn and become a better version of ourselves.
And you know, one of the things I find most inspiring about Kaizen Kanban is that it's not just about achieving a specific goal or outcome.
Right.
It's about cultivating a mindset of curiosity, creativity, and resilience.
It's about seeing challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for learning and growth.
And it's about empowering individuals and communities to take ownership of their own improvement journey.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I feel like I've not only gained a deeper understanding of Kaizen Kanban, but also a renewed sense of possibility.
Yeah.
It's given me a framework for approaching challenges with a more positive and proactive mindset.
And that's really what it's all about. It's about giving people the tools and the inspiration to make things better in their work, in their lives, and in the world around them.
Well, I don't know about you, dear listeners, but I'm feeling inspired. I'm ready to grab my sticky notes, create my own Kanban board, and start tackling those challenges one small step at a time.
And remember, continuous improvement is a journey, not a destination.
So keep experimenting, keep learning, and never stop striving for better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep those ideas flowing. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.